Looking at Abu Dhabi today with its high-rise buildings and sophisticated infrastructure, it's hard to imagine that when Sheikh Zayed was born just over 100 years ago, it was a simple pearl diving and fishing settlement made up of barasti houses scattered around a rudimentary fort. There were no basic amenities like electricity or running water, no paved roads, schools or hospitals. In fact, there were no permanent structures on the island apart from the Qasr Al Hosn, which is behind me. Abu Dhabi Island's life as a settlement had actually begun a couple of centuries before, in 1761, when fresh water was discovered close to where I'm sitting. The story goes that a hunter was tracking a gazelle and was about to shoot it when he saw it drinking from a spring and realized that there was fresh water here. The island was thus named Abu Dhabi, meaning father of the gazelle, or Dhabi in Arabic. And in 1795, a coral stone watchtower was built by the ruler of the Bani Yas tribe, Sheikh Zayed bin Isa Al Nahyan, to guard this valuable commodity, which was more precious than gold in the harsh desert environment. As news of this news source spread, people started to move to Abu Dhabi for its proximity to the area's rich pearling sites. A makeshift fishing village soon emerged, and the watchtower expanded to become a fort that eventually became the Al Nahyan seat of power. As the place it all began, the Qasr Al Hosn is a perfect place to start our journey in the steps of Sheikh Zayed. So come with me inside to learn a few more interesting facts about those early days at the fort.
So I would imagine that in the 1800s and the 1900s, Qasr Al Hosn isn't what people see today. It's not this, three-building structure, which is the watchtower, the inner fort, and the outer palace. It was just the inner fort and the watchtower, and that was probably the biggest structure in Abu Dhabi at the time. There were probably, houses, barasti houses, tents around the area, but not really much. And when we actually did try to find archival photos and pictures in that time frame, we couldn't really find much. So there is kind of a gap between 1904, when Hermann Burckhardt, who was a German traveler, took a photo of Sheikh Zayed I right outside the fort in his majlis, and then the next photos were in the 1940s. So this is why I mentioned that there is kind of like a gap of information, a gap of research. Maybe other researchers have it, and I would love to know more. But what we can know is the way of life back then. Life was much simpler. The economy relied mainly on pearl diving, on fishing. And it was, I believe, the year 1918, that was the end of World War I, and then you have in the 1920s the invention of the Japanese cultured pearl. So that was the beginning of this economic recession and the depression that happened, and that greatly affected Abu Dhabi. So Sheikh Zayed wasn't born in a very prosperous city, but he did grow up to see poverty and to see hardships, economic hardships, and then to see the developments that his brother made. And then he grew up to actually become the leader and become the ruler of Abu Dhabi and build on his brother's achievements and make Abu Dhabi into this great, thriving global city that we live in today. So in 1939, the oil concession documents between the British Petroleum Company and the government of Abu Dhabi were signed, and that actually gave Abu Dhabi a bit of capital to start building. And what Sheikh Shakhbout did with that money was he built the outer palace, and the outer palace that people can come and visit today, consisted of many rooms. Half of them were actually used as government rooms, as administrative rooms, and that allowed for the opening up of many jobs. Eventually, Qasr Al Hosn and the outer palace also became the headquarters for the Abu Dhabi police. So there were developments from the start ever since the oil concession documents were signed. And Sheikh Shakhbout really oversaw that. I think the beginning, the first 10-15 years of his rule, there was a lot of economic hardship, but then during the 1940s, that is when things started to really improve. He, for example, issued the construction of the pipes that actually got fresh water from Al Ain all the way to Abu Dhabi. So he really did a lot to help his people. And then you see the 1940s and the 1950s and kind of developments that happened. So for me, as the curator of Qasr Al Hosn, the 1940s, 1950s, and 1960s were really the most interesting times because their royal family lived there. The ruling family lived there, and the members of Abu Dhabi's community used to walk in and out. They would come and visit the Sheikh in the Sheikh's Majlis. The women would come and visit Sheikha Salama, the ruler's mother, and just sit with her and meet her daughters and granddaughters. You would have foreign dignitaries come and bring their wives with them. You would have a lot of guards. So I can imagine, you could just like step into the shoes back in time. You could imagine such a lively place and really a center for the community. And that is what I find really fascinating. It's the everyday life kind of, and the way that Qasr Al Hosn was like the heart of the community. So Sheikh Zayed's mother is Sheikha Salama bint Batil Kbaisi. She was a very strong, very formidable woman. She's actually my favorite character in the history of Qasr Al Hosn. She was very wise, and during the rule of both Sheikh Shakhbout and Sheikh Zayed, they went to her for advice almost daily. They relied on her for her wisdom. She's seen a lot, and she is just one character that showcases the strength and the kind of position that women held, the position of respect and of authority. This maybe idea of women being subservient or being meek or whatever, that didn't actually exist. She was actually someone that people were quite, they respected and they were quite terrified of as well. We have a few accounts of people recounting their time with her. She had a sense of humor, she was kind, but again, as I mentioned, she was, very strong and she was really interesting. He was just known for his kindness and his generosity, and that is something that was instilled in every single child in the United Arab Emirates. We are to this day known as Ayal Zayed, the children of Zayed, and it is his values that kind of, are passed down to us through education, through our family, through hearing stories about him. We understand the importance of tolerance, of kindness, of generosity, and we try to emulate that in many ways. And there are many ways that we know we can't measure up, but even if we try, that will be enough.